Good afternoon and happy holidays. Welcome to this installment of our UpSkill Houston Works Forum virtual series, where we engage business and community leaders, policymakers, and leading thinkers on the key workforce issues our region and nation confront. I am Bryant Black with the Greater Houston Partnership's UpSkill Houston initiative that partners with employers, educational leadership, and community-based organizations to strengthen the talent pipeline our region's employers need to help Houstonians connect to the good jobs that increase economic mobility and prosperity. Today, we're going to be discussing gateways to career exploration and pathways. Many of our local educational institutions and community organizations and businesses acknowledge that we need to find new and innovative ways to help the citizens and youth of the region find good jobs. Today, we will talk about ways to bring those opportunities to life for middle and high school age people. New tools and resources for assisting students in that journey along the career exploration continuum are being rolled out locally and across Texas to show students a wide array of opportunities to pursue in the jobs that drive our ever diversifying economy. Before we get to our guests, I want to do several things. First, we are about to enter flu season, or we're already entering flu season, and I'd like to offer a couple of quick reminders. Second, I'll review a couple of housekeeping details and acknowledge the underwriters of the UpSkill Works Forum series. So we're entering flu season and we can do a lot to ensure we are safe for the holiday season. There are just 6 things we already know that can help Houston and all of our residents stay safe and healthy. 1, get your flu shot. 2, wear masks. 3, social distance. 4, avoid congregate settings. 5, gather outdoors. 6, wash your hands. And now for a couple of housekeeping details. All attendees are muted and your videos turned off for the entirety of the webinar. Please do not use the chat function for Q&A. This will not be moderated for questions, but if you have any specific comments you can make there. For the chat function should be used to connect with our production team if you have those questions. If you do have questions for our guests, you should use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. This will be moderated. I'd also like to acknowledge the sponsors for the 2020 UpSkill Works Web Forum series. The Greater Houston Partnership and UpSkill Houston would like to thank our gold level sponsors, Houston Community College, the Merrick family of companies, Texas Mutual Insurance, and Winstead PC. Our silver level sponsors include Accenture, AT&T, Centerpoint Energy, HCA Houston Healthcare, Lone Star College, San Jacinto College, Western Governors University of Texas. So thank you for all of our sponsors for supporting UpSkill Houston's work. So joining us today to discuss career exploration and pathways, we are fortunate to have with us 2 leaders in this space at the state and local level. First, we have Victoria Chen, who is the co-founder and executive director of BridgeYear, a Houston-based nonprofit founded in 2016, whose vision is for all students to graduate high school with a path to gainful employment. BridgeYear believes there is no one-size-fits-all approach to education and that multiple options must be made available for students to make informed decisions about their futures. Through hands-on experiences called career test drives or CTDs, BridgeYear has built a foundation for student exploration, opening up possibilities to technical career pathways for thousands of Houstonians. This year, the operation is even reaching other cities outside of Houston through a partnership with an employer association, which we'll talk about later. So it's always good to see Houston taking ideas to other parts of the country. Victoria has her undergrad from Brown University and an MBA from Yale and came to Houston through Teach for America. She previously was a teacher and counselor at Sharpstown High School with her co-founder Victoria Doan, where they originally identified the need for hands-on learning experiences and broader exposure to the trades and non-4-year degree pathways for local students. We're also lucky to have with us Laura Brennan, director of Texas OnCourse, whose mission is for all high school graduates, no matter where they're coming from or where they're going, to have a plan for what's next. Through a network of tools, partnerships, and activities across the state, Laura and Texas OnCourse are working to ensure the growing youth population of Texas are prepared for college and career success after high school. Laura leads the development of best-in-class products to advance career and college readiness across the state of Texas. Prior to joining UT Austin's Texas OnCourse, Laura completed her master's in education policy from the Harvard Graduate School of Education, where her research focused on access and success in higher education for traditionally underserved students and educational pathways for undocumented youth. Before that, Laura worked at KIPP Austin Public Schools, designing and implementing programming to support students to and through college. All right, so first let's talk about the continuum of a career journey. As you see here, the career journey from K through 12 to a good job involves an intricate network of stakeholders that guide and lead students and adults along their path. The traditional journey from K through 12 to post-secondary to a long career at one job is becoming less and less common, and students need to be informed of what options they have to getting into as many opportunities as possible. On this career continuum from cradle to career, there are many educational institutions, support organizations, and employers along the way who can assist students in making these decisions. But it's important to think about the career exploration as a lifelong journey. From start to finish, you're seeing what the impact of this true value chain can be for students going into their career opportunities. So moving on to the next slide, here are a few examples of those stakeholders in Houston and across Texas who make that journey a reality throughout that value chain, including Texas OnCourse and BridgeYear. So we want to get into what these specific organizations are doing to make that a reality for our local population. You'll see the attract, train, and place continuum here, and some of those stakeholders, some of them might be joining us here today on the call. So I'd like to welcome now Victoria and Laura. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Bryant.
Thank you.
So yeah, welcome. So let's talk a little bit about this learning journey of assisting students in their careers. So Victoria, why don't we start with you? Give us a little history on how BridgeYear came to be. When you first kicked this off, I know that you recognize, kind of identified a gap while working at Sharpstown that you thought needed to be filled. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so thanks again for having me. My co-founder and I, we were working at Sharpstown as college counselors. And we were one of the few schools actually that were fortunate enough to have multiple people staffed in our college and career center. And we did call it that. We call it the College and Career Center. So we work with students on both. And I was fortunate enough to meet with every single 11th grader to have in-depth career conversations. And I would say that was probably unique because we had so many staff in that center. But in the course of these conversations, I learned three really interesting things. One was that there were just unrealistic expectations that students often had about how to obtain careers. So I had a lot of students tell me that they wanted to pursue really advanced degrees in healthcare, right? They wanted to be psychiatrists, surgeons, pediatricians. And I would ask them, well, that's a great goal. You must really like school and being in school. And they would say, oh no, miss, I hate school. I would rather not go to school. I'm like, we might need to find other healthcare professions for you because this might be too long of a pathway for what you're interested in. The second thing I noticed was that there were common professions that I heard over and over again, right? I heard that students wanted to be teachers, they wanted to be doctors, nurses, policemen, engineers came up all the time, right? And that to me spoke about a couple of things. One was that there was just limited understanding about what other careers were, right? But then the second thing was when I asked students why they wanted to be an engineer, I would always hear two things. It was either, I want to be an engineer because somebody told me I was good at math and therefore I should be an engineer, which to me means we don't know of other professions that also require math. Or two is I want to be an engineer because I like to work on cars. And I don't know about you, but I have a lot of engineer friends who spend a lot of time at their desk in front of a computer and have never touched a single car. And so that made me think, well, we have a limited understanding of what careers actually do on a day-to-day basis. And so a lot of why we started BridgeYear was to tackle those three things. We need to give kids and students more opportunities to explore what educational pathways they actually need to pursue to get a career they want. We needed to explore many different careers and not just those top 5 that students already know about. And three, we needed to give students a real understanding of what careers did on a day-to-day basis, Monday through Friday. And so I'll tell you more about that when we get into that section.
Okay, fantastic. That's good context. So Laura, similarly, can you give us a little history on how Texas OnCourse, kind of the evolution of how you got to this point?
Sure. And Victoria, thank you so much for sharing that. I have a very similar experience in working at Bryant shared that I worked at KIPP Austin, and I worked directly with students as well. Actually, I worked with students from 9th through when they graduated from college or certificate or certification program. And I heard the same things. In Austin, it's very similar. You know, I want to be a doctor. I want to be, actually another one was CSI, because I think that's something they see in the media, right? Like these positions that they have exposure to are often so limited. Like we're talking 5 to maybe 10 positions. And anyway, I really appreciated what you shared, and I have a very similar experience. But Texas OnCourse actually came to be through the state legislature. So as I'm sure most on this call are aware, in 2013, you know, the state passed House Bill 5, and that very much changed how students were going through not only high school, but middle school. House Bill 5 required students to select a pathway or endorsement. If you're not familiar with endorsement, it's basically, I like to compare it kind of like a meta major, like STEM, arts and humanities, business and industry. And a child would select that in middle school and plan for their courses in middle school that they would take in high school. So obviously that caused a lot of just challenge for both students, families, and understanding how this may implicate that child's future, and counselors, educators in understanding how to best support students with these pretty high stakes decisions early in their life, right? So the legislature realized that students, educators, families just needed more support, and they dedicated that support in the next legislative session in 2015 when they charged UT Austin with developing Texas OnCourse. So I'll get into what Texas OnCourse is and what we offer, but really the core rationale behind why we exist is to support students, you know, on this pathway from middle school to high school to success post high school. Yeah. So that's sort of why Texas OnCourse exists. And so we are state funded. Again, we were initially built within the University of Texas. So we're an initiative of the University of Texas. That's actually changing come the new year. We are joining the Texas Higher Ed Coordinating Board, which is an exciting move for us, and I think aligns really well with the new Commissioner Keller's vision in ensuring quality advising across the spectrum for students.
Wow, that sounds like an exciting move, and I know that we've worked closely with Commissioner Keller on several initiatives, so that's great to hear. Okay,
One
great,
more thing, Bryant, I'll just say
sure,
that
go ahead.
Commissioner Keller was actually the founder of Texas OnCourse within UT. So before he was in his role as commissioner at the Higher Ed Coordinating Board, he was the deputy to the president for strategy and policy at UT Austin and my boss. So Texas OnCourse is very close to his heart too.
Indeed. It's a good fit. That's great to hear. Okay, now that we have a little background on the why the both of you are in this space and kind of operating in this career exploration world, I'd like to get into a little bit of kind of the how and what. So how have BridgeYear and Texas OnCourse addressed that need for middle school and high school students to explore and understand careers? What are you doing? What are you doing? What organizations are playing in that space? Laura, we already have you. What can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So again, since we were a charge from the legislature, we did have some core areas we were to deliver on. And as I shared, the why, which is supporting those students in middle school and beyond, and improving the advising that they receive, we are kind of organized in two core areas of work. And we'll spend the majority of the time talking about our work with middle school students, but I did want to share quickly what we offer in the other area of work, which is around college and career advising. So we have developed an online training platform for anyone who advises students in Texas for college and career success. That could be a middle school teacher, advisor, counselor, high school teacher, advisor, counselor, maybe administrator, who is interested in having all the updated information around financial aid, pathways, post-secondary pathways, and career advising. I will say that our career pathways online learning experiences have been in very high demand. And we've connected with our users many times. Actually, it's just on an ongoing basis. We're very plugged into our user base. They actually helped build the tool. And what we hear from users who are the educators and counselors is that career advising can often be very challenging because that's not necessarily the pathway that individual as the counselor or the teacher took, right? Like they went through their K-12 and then they went to college, got a degree, became an educator or became a counselor. And so advising around certification, certificates, and different pathways can often be really challenging for those professionals. And they don't necessarily in their counseling programs receive formalized training on how to do so. So we provide that in what we call the Texas OnCourse Academy. And so there's over 16,000 users in the Academy now across the state of Texas. It's been a really impressive adoption rate from our founding in 2015. So that's one area of work. The other area of work that I think is really interesting to this conversation is more around the career awareness piece of the puzzle. So we provide for middle school educators college and career readiness curriculum. And that curriculum can be used in a classroom and helps the teacher have a structured way to engage students in conversations around college and career. So while a curriculum is wonderful, and actually there's been a huge demand for the curriculum, we're now on our 4th iteration of the curriculum. What makes Texas OnCourse unique is the portfolio of digital resources that come with the curriculum and help students engage in deeper learning. So I'll talk through a couple of those. So one of them, and maybe some of you are familiar, maybe some of you have middle school students yourselves and they're using it, hopefully. If you have middle school students and they're not using it, you can write this down and you can download it from the App Store or get it on our website. It's all free, state funded. So Middle Galaxy is a career exploration game that we actually developed in partnership with MIT. And it's just kind of a fun way for students to learn more about different career pathways available to them and different specific occupations. So like Victoria said, and my experience aligns as well, we know kids have 5 to 10 occupations that they're really familiar with and that they always cite as what they want to be, even if they're, their personal interest and maybe their interest in school does not align with what that particular occupation may demand. So this game really just is about exposing them to the different occupations. It's sort of a space theme, and they're going on missions and they're matching different occupations with the needs for that mission. So not only are they learning about the occupations that exist, but also the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed for those occupations to have success in their inner galactic mission. So that's one tool that we offer. And it's been a really great way to just engage students in deeper conversations in the classroom. Again, it is not meant to like stand alone. A kid plays this game and they know everything they need to know about all the occupations that exist in Texas. I will say, however, it's real data. So we worked with the Workforce Commission on occupations that are in demand in the next 10 years, earn at least median income, and have a substantial number of openings. So it's Texas specific data, but it's really about just a fun way to more deeply engage students. So that's the one tool around career awareness. We also have another tool called Map My Grad, which I like to compare to sort of the TurboTax of planning your high school experience. So it helps kids select their endorsement, which can be very overwhelming if you are in 8th grade and you're trying to figure out, you know, what you want to do in high school. It's an overwhelming decision for not only the students, but for the parents as well. And also for the educators who are trying to support these kids in making the best decisions. So what it does is it allows the student to explore a little bit about the endorsements available, and then they're able to actually get into their high school that they're planning to attend and select the courses that are available in that specific high school and create their 4-year plan. So this, again, you know, while I like to compare it to TurboTax because really a student and family could do this, get in, do it on their own at home, and it's pretty self-explanatory. The user experience is really, I would say, really good to allow the student to do it on their own without much support. But it really is used to promote deeper conversations with the counselor advisor. We know that counselors and advisors have very, very minimal time to spend with students. And so if they have to spend that time with students going over like the basic, you know, you need to take X, Y, Z in your 9th grade year, then they don't get to the deeper conversations. And so really, if a child is able to come into an advising session with this 4-year plan already done and built, they can have a deeper conversation and just ask more substantial questions and hopefully get a more robust advising session with their counselor and educator. So I know that was a lot of information, and I think there's some questions coming in.
Yeah, I think somebody was curious about of kind of career advising and career guidance tools for adults. Are y'all playing in that space at all?
So for adults, so our training is technically for professionals who are advising students, right? That's the academy. We also have, even before this planned move to the coordinating board, we were working with the coordinating board to expand the academy resources to serve college and career advisors in the higher ed, within the higher ed setting. So, you know, I guess it's through a professional, those resources may be delivered to an adult who is pursuing higher education. But we do not directly offer resources for re-engaging adults. It's mostly through the professionals who are providing the advising.
And that's okay. You obviously went through a full suite of offerings that you have, including, you know, the Galaxy tool and the kind of the train the trainer aspect of what y'all are doing with counselors and teachers. And these are all meant to kind of help with that decision-making process. And I think it's really, really a testament to the work that's being done. Victoria, what do you have to add in that space? Where's the work taking you right now? What's going on with understanding careers and exploration at BridgeYear right now? Where are you working? What are you seeing that's actually really moving the needle there?
Yeah, absolutely. So I love what Laura said about having a more robust advising session because students have already done the pre-work. Because I think that's the framework we're bringing to BridgeYear too. So our signature program at BridgeYear is called, like you mentioned, the Career Test Drive, because one should never buy a car without test driving it. So we shouldn't choose our career without test driving it too either. And so we were trying to build off of when we were, in high schools and talking to students about careers, the resources were limited, right? It was go to this website and read about what a cabinet installer does, or go to this website and read about what a health information technician does. And that's not exciting, right? So our career test drives before COVID, we would go into a school and transform their gym. So in every section of the gym, a student is doing a hands-on activity related to that career, right? So I'm not going to tell you what an installer does. You are going to drill some pilot holes and put together an actual door for a cabinet. Or you're going to go across the gym and for a health information technician, you are actually going to read patient notes and doctor's visits notes, and you're going to put together a bill that's sent off to the insurance company, right? It's a hook, it's an activity that students do. And then you best believe that when they then talk and debrief the experience, they're like, that installer one really loved the power tools, could not sit still with the billing and coding, right? There's something tangible they can react to. So that was pre-COVID. Post-COVID, clearly we're not going to schools right now, but we've taken that feeling, right? That hands-on feeling that we believe needs to be in every career exploration experience. And we put them in kit form. So students are now getting kits, physical boxes mailed to their homes, or they can pick it up at their school site, and it contains all the materials they need to explore 2 high growth, in demand careers in particular industries. So think about it like a science lab, just in a box, and it's around careers. So that's what we've been working on. What I'm really proud of, though, is that we're creating something that can scale, right? Laura mentioned there are a lot of students in Texas, and we started just in Houston. But I think oftentimes when we talk about hands-on activities or in-depth career exploration, it's often for a limited few. But last school year, even with COVID, we worked with over 7,000 students, and we're on track to make some moves outside of Texas as well.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to know about both what Texas OnCourse and what BridgeYear are doing is that they are both scalable. Whether it be from a technology perspective or from a hands-on perspective, these are both kind of applicable solutions that school districts, specific schools, and the state as a whole can really take from and learn and use to find ways that students can look into new avenues for success. And I think that's really important. Okay, that's great. So I wanted to remind the crowd, if you do have any questions for Victoria or Laura, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll definitely try to get to them as much as possible, as long as they're within the realm of the career exploration discussion. I definitely think that we'll have time for at least a couple. So please feel free to ask. I believe we have some educators on here, so I know you're familiar with the endorsement process and everything that comes along with it. So we'd be happy to answer some of those questions. I know Laura and Victoria are both familiar with that as well. Okay, so we've talked about the why and the how. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the best practices and changes that you've seen, kind of the effective strategies for kind of the working groups within the districts, how to get leadership buy-in. What are your approaches to holistic integration of that college and career counseling that you mentioned? What are some of the effective program selections that you're doing? Can you talk a bit about what you've learned from doing this, and for Victoria in the last 4 years or so? If you want to go ahead and get us started, what have you learned from this experience so far in your district by district or broader experiences, or even down to the school level?
Yeah, I think a big mindset shift that's happened in the past couple of years that I think is good, is that we are starting to say that college is a stepping stone, right? College is not the final destination. And back when I was teaching, that wasn't the case, because when we asked students, hey, what do you want to do after high school? It was, I want to go to college. And I was like, well, why do you want to go to college? It's like, well, I was told I need to go to college. I think that conversation is changing. I think that's awesome. I think a best practice for me, and I'm thinking back to time at Sharpstown, is we had the college and career center, right? Those were the same conversation. And I think there are many reasons why in schools or districts we have them as separate departments. That's way above my pay grade. Like, why do we have college readiness and CTE as a separate department? But I think when I think about it from a student's perspective, if I have a college advisor on my campus and I have a career advisor on my campus, we're painting a duality and an either or that doesn't need to be true and probably shouldn't be true. So I would love to see more integration of those two departments at the district level and also at the school levels. And then last thing I'll say is probably the schools that are the strongest BridgeYear partners are ones that have really taken a deep dive into every single type of student that they have and every single type of post-secondary goal they might have, right? And looking at, I have students who want to go to four-year schools. What are the suites of services, interventions, after-school programs that I have at my school to fit that target population? And then I also have students who aren't sure if they want to go to college. And I also have students who know they don't want to go to a four-year college, right? What are the suites, programs, services, after-school programs that exist for the other two buckets? And I think the most successful schools have a range of programs and interventions to meet all students rather than just one program, because one program cannot fit all the needs of our students.
Yeah, I agree. I think that automatic bifurcation of college and career right there, it's happening for reasons along the way, but you are seeing a little bit more of them too being brought back together. So that's interesting. Laura, you have that state view. You've worked at you worked with KIPP, you've worked at the district level, and you also now have the there's 30 million people in Texas. You've met them all, I'm sure. So why don't you give us an idea of what you're seeing out there in terms of programmatic change at Texas OnCourse?
I don't know if I've met them all, but yeah, we've definitely learned some things along the way. And one, I think, key learning for us has been how important it is to have a more systemic buy-in to what you are offering. So like, yes, it's great that we have 16,000 counselors and educators on this platform engaging in online learning about how to advise students better, right? Like, that's awesome. But the real impact comes from, and I think Victoria, you brought this up too, like, okay, well, what does that student think when they have the career advisor and they have that counselor, the college advisor, and that's separate? Like, that's a district level decision. And I think that we have found that our greatest impact can occur when there's a district adoption of our programming. So not only are, the educators who advise students using the academy, but they're connecting with the middle school educators who are using our curriculum, and there's dialogue across the middle school and the high school, and then at the leadership level. So we've really been focused strategically on how to encourage more systemic adoption, as opposed to just like, these middle school teachers are using this curriculum, these high school counselors might be using our academy. Instead, how do we get everyone to sort of create a more unified experience for that student who's going through middle school to the high school? We can do that. And we've seen districts who are taking really innovative approaches to connecting the middle school and high school educators and making sure that experience is seamless for students. So that's really our focus. I would say systemic adoption. I would also say that, the whole reason why we exist is because House Bill 5 was hard. To make that change is hard. And people need support to implement something that is hard, right? And so we could have the best tools and resources and, just these really shiny, beautiful things. But if we're not helping people know how to best implement it, and again, at the systemic level, then it's going to fail. So we've also been investing more in how we can support implementation and really highlight best practices in implementation and share that across the state, so that there's not just like, oh, there's a bright spot here, there's a lot of dark spots over here. Like, let's illuminate it all and make all of the districts bright spots in how they're working, across middle school, high school, using resources to the best of their capacity and supporting students. So those are our areas of focus: implementation, support, and systemic adoption.
Yeah, I think you're in a great spot to make that happen because of the kind of diverse population and the nature of all the different districts in the state. They can all learn from each other just because they are differing. They could still pick up little things along the way where they have seen success. Speaking of that, we have a question from the other part of the state, from Lubbock. Our colleague Angela in Lubbock asking about Victoria, about the kits. How do students and counselors get a hold of those kits? Are there individual access, or what does that process look like?
Yep, we have counselors requesting them for entire schools. We've had counselors request them for specific students, but all that's on our website. I'll drop the link in the chat. Most recently, we did a collaboration with Las Vegas's CTE department, which was really exciting for us to see kind of CTE getting directly involved in post-secondary. But I'll drop the link in the chat.
Okay, and second, we have a question from I believe it's Katie from Katie ISD here in the Houston area. So it's a statement and a question. It's saying the statement should be, what do you want to do as a career, and then what education do you need from there? And I was just, do y'all have any follow up on that? Is that your perspective as well?
Absolutely. I think that's 100% right. And I think that's where we get into questions of, well, I don't know what careers are out there, or I don't know what this career entails. And so I think that's why when we think about the career journey, exploration, awareness is an important, critical part of that funnel. And it's not a one-time thing. It's not like I filled out this interest survey and I'm done exploring, right? It's like I filled out the interest surveys. I did some hands-on activity. I hated the hands-on activities. I went back to the survey. It's a process.
Yeah, it's all one more data point, right? Yeah. So moving on a little bit, we've, when we showed the continuum earlier, kind of that cradle to career mindset, we talked a little bit about, moving along into what takes you to a career. But I know you're both focused on the importance of the middle school, the time of a student in middle school as very important to where you end up in that journey. Laura, could you talk a little bit about what you're doing in middle school, why you think that's so important, and what others can replicate or at least learn from about what Texas OnCourse is doing?
Yeah, I mean, the why middle school for us really, that was our charge, right? But why did the legislature charge us with that? I think is a more interesting question. And, of course, what I mentioned around like selecting the endorsement and being prepared for that decision, but like also, students' course taking patterns in high school have a huge influence. We know this from the literature. They have a huge influence on the student's success post high school. And if kids are being asked to really start that decision making early, which they are, and beginning in 9th grade, your course selections matter. Then they need support. They need to, and to the other point of, okay, what do I want to be? And then how do I get there? Like, you need to start thinking about that earlier before you make those pretty significant decisions in starting high school of which courses you're going to take that may influence and will, we know, influence your future. So, I think that's a really important reason for middle school. And honestly, we have educators who are using some of our resources even earlier. So in elementary school, not using everything, right? But just taking some of the core ideas and incorporating it into even earlier years, because it's not too early to start thinking about just different pathways and options, and just kind of expanding students' minds in that way. But I think I already kind of touched on like what we're doing in the middle school. Again, it's really that curriculum and then all of these tools and resources that support the deeper conversations and the learning provided through the teachers and the advisors in the middle school. Anything else you'd like me to kind of follow up on there, Bryant?
No, I think that gives good perspective. I mean, it's just, I think when people think about the college or career exploration, they're immediately going to go to somebody who's about to graduate and potentially move out into the world. But it's, the idea of that hands-on experience, or, learning and exploring different ways, different things that they might not have known about. I think moving back into the pipeline is important. And I think it's something that people should be cognizant of. Victoria, anything to add there about the middle school? I know BridgeYear kind of has potentially is or has begun moving into that space a little bit. Would you like to add anything there?
Yeah, we hadn't thought of middle school when we first started BridgeYear. We were founded to work with that high school to workforce transition. But ever since we started, middle school educators were asking us to adapt to their students. And so about a third of our students came from middle school last school year. And that was our first year of launching our middle school program. So I think the demand is definitely there. One thing we've noticed from middle school, though, is it's actually a great time because it's a time when students are forming career identity, right? It's the time when they start thinking, I could see myself in healthcare, I can see myself in technology or construction or whatever that is. And that's very different from when we work with high school students. So when we work with high school students, when we go into that gym, typically the student's career identity around an industry has already formed. And so they know that they want to do healthcare. And so they're only trying the healthcare careers, or they're only trying the construction careers. Whereas when we did our middle school events, there was much more exploration. They're almost doing it more with an open mind. And that's exciting to work with younger students because of that.
Yeah. And it's a little cliche, but I think there is something with students losing that loss of hands-on experience and career exploration as they move from elementary to middle school, where they're getting, and this gives them that option or avenue to find those other opportunities. So it's really exciting. So I'd like to kind of move back to something we visited earlier, the continuum of kind of cradle to career. We started off looking at that framework and how when we think about career exploration, where you fit into this, and most on the call could probably identify themselves in at least one or two of these places. And for our audience members, as we move forward, I'd like you to think about where your organization fits in, how you could use this continuum to think about how you could partner differently, how you can, and it's a bit of a call to action to think about when students are trying to think about careers, or from an employer perspective, when you're thinking about where you're cultivating talent, where can you go? How can you partner differently, whether you see with a tier 1 or a tier 2 supplier, or your traditional means of working with hiring managers? Where can you find new relationships that fall on this continuum, and thinking about maybe the non-traditional ways of creating new relationships or multiple partnerships? And really, we wanted for this to kind of you to take this with you, so that you can think about that when you think about career exploration going forward. This is a way to do that. So with that said, Victoria, Laura, do y'all have anything else that I missed? I think we're at a good. We don't have any questions out there right now.
I would just say that, when I'm looking at that, and I believe this screen sharing stopped. Actually, would you mind just pulling that screen sharing back up? When I look at this, I really, and Victoria, let me know if you disagree, but I really see Texas OnCourse fitting in more of the career awareness, and BridgeYear fitting more in like actual exploration. And I think that that's so important, that there's like there are different activities that you do in each of these different stages, and different knowledge that students gain in each of these different stages. And just, thinking about from a systemic perspective, if you're a district or, a school, like what is maybe you're heavy in career awareness, but you're not offering things in career exploration, or vice versa. And it could be interesting to think about like how you could fill that gap, or even do a analysis of where your services fall within this continuum.
Yeah, I think it's where your services fall and for which students.
Yeah.
Right. Because I think we do a really good job pushing some students all the way through this continuum, and some students we stop at career awareness. So how can we get more students through would be the question.
Yeah, the small number or the smaller percentage of students who understand that pathway, or it's broadening that number. It's proportionally growing who can make it all the way through, for sure. We have a couple
and
of
that also relies on that also relies on employer partners, right? And it does involve that next step after the hands-on exploration is the preparation, the training stage, and that's something we can't do alone.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a couple of questions. One is kind of the role around community colleges. Is there a particular role that they can play in helping school districts, and even going further back, like we talked about in the pipeline, school-age children identify career goals and pathways?
I think community colleges are key. I mean, they're the premier training provider for a lot of the positions we're talking about. And I think them being crystal clear about their offerings and their value add to the community speaks volumes when we're talking to students. I think you all had a panel last week. Panelists talked about kind of the dual role that community colleges find themselves in as either the stepping stone to four-year or the vocational training provider. And I would love to see them emphasize even more all the great work they do around certifications and workforce development.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention that some of the numbers that were brought up on that panel about just the sheer number of community college students that are just kind of a foundational to our workforce maybe goes missed a little bit. So and there are, we have San Jacinto and Houston on the call. Some of these colleges are really rethinking the way that they're partnering with employers to make sure that some of these opportunities are identified.
Absolutely. And I think that that's a message that I'm not sure is always at the high school level yet. Right. I think that when students think about community college, they think about it in that very traditional four-year stepping stone, and they're not thinking about it in terms of the certificates they can get yet. And so I'd love to see that conversation shift, at least so they know what all the options are.
Sure. There is also a question about undecided seniors. So I guess this might be a little bit more of a life advice from Laura and Victoria. What advice do you have for undecided seniors that are, still, I know BridgeYear has worked with post seniors who are still undecided, but what about those students in the across the state who are still trying to figure out what their next step is? Laura, you can get us started.
Sure. I mean, I think it's, there's a lot out there for students to try and navigate. There are so many resources. So maybe it's that individual that's supporting that student, really helping them hone in on the resources that would be helpful to them. Because they are, I mean, I think it just varies in so many different ways. Like, who is the undecided student? Do they know that are they completely undecided? Do they want to go to college? Do they want to, there's so many, I'm like reflecting on my experience as an advisor and in high school. And when I had undecided students, I mean, one, I kind of knew them, so you kind of can help them because them, get the right resources that will help support their decision making. And that's not going to be the same for every student. That's going to be different based on who that student is. So I don't know that I have like a maybe Victoria does, but I don't know that I have like some wisdom there for any undecided student because it's so different for everyone.
It's the hardest group of students to work with, right? When the student sits across from me and says, I don't know what I want to do. We had a really strong partnership with the Yes Prep school last year, and their principal had this philosophy that every kid had to graduate with plan A, plan B, and plan C. And I kind of liked that framing because it removed the pressure of, I know what I want, it's plan A. And it's more, there are 3 great options. I, as a student, know all the steps I need to take to kind of unlock each option. And when life gets in the way or things change or whatnot, they have 3 different options. And I think that actually sets more students up for success. So
I like that.
I don't know if that helps the undecided student, but I think maybe if we don't force them to commit right upon graduation and still let them to explore within some safety net of pre-described options, we might lose fewer students, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I think I bet if you did a poll, plan B and plan C were probably realistic or became the real option more often than you would imagine for all students.
So, and I think that's how adults think about careers too, right? Like we have our own plan Bs and plan Cs. And we never ask adults like, well, what are you going to do for the rest of your life? But we ask that of 18-year-olds, which I think is overwhelming, maybe unfair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's all the questions I'm seeing. I did want to before we close up, we have tried to make this a not COVID specific or really COVID at all conversation. I know Victoria, y'all are working with the testing, with the kits and everything, but on a lighter note, what are each of you doing to take your mind off everything that's happened this year? What are we watching? What are we listening to? What's the exercise? What's going on?
Well, I'm having a baby in February, so that's a focus of mine.
Congratulations.
I would say. Thank you.
Yeah.
I am trying not to gain as much weight as I bake a ton of things out of stress and trying not to eat them all.
So baking, okay.
Baking and then working it off somewhat successfully.
Of course, yeah. Well, yeah, so thank you both. I mean, this was wonderful. Thank you for your time and sharing your insights. You know, as our audience will see on their screens now, we have listed information about BridgeYear. I believe there are also some links shared, and also about Texas OnCourse. I believe there were some links shared in the chat. And thank you for everybody in the audience for participating in our UpSkill Works Forum series, and also our gold and silver underwriters who make this possible. And to our audience, thanks for some really insightful questions. Have a great week, and we hope to see you soon.